Okay.
All right, what is up, you heathens and demons? Sorry, the long intro. I'm kind of lost on the chat right now, so I'm gonna have to get out and refresh probably. But what is up, you heathens and demons? We are gonna have a good show today. I got Maddie from Science Side Up. Her link is in the description below. So please, right now you can go and subscribe. Come right back. We're gonna have a really good conversation. But I'm gonna let Maddie introduce herself while I refresh this page.
Okay. Hey, team. I'm Maddie. I have a brand new baby YouTube channel. It's called Science Side Up, where I just try to talk about science concepts and cool science things in a way that's accessible to humans that haven't spent their entire adult lives doing science like I have. So I have a bachelor's degree from MIT in math and effectively geophysics. I spent 4 years in the Navy teaching nuclear physics. And now I'm in grad school for meteorology, and I specifically study the Arctic. But yeah, so I've kind of got a diverse background there. And what I want to talk about, what I wanted to come on Rage Atheist channel, and he was kind enough to let me come on today. I want to talk about some of our favorite cupcakes claims from a science perspective, and talking about just like things he gets wrong and seems to like really misunderstand, because it bothers me when people on the internet are wrong.
Me too. And it bothers me when I get hit with arguments and I have no idea what they're talking about and he has no idea what he's talking about.
And that's the thing, like, bless his heart, he doesn't. I've in any time I've listened to him talk on videos and things, I've yet to hear him say something scientifically which is factual. Um, and that's concerning to me. Like, really?
Yeah, and he's so convinced and I don't even think he's like really convinced of it. I think he just wants to sound like he is because he knows that he's just spitting off as you said before the stream, Kant Hovind rhetoric. You know, I mean, he is a
Mm-hmm.
Kant Hovind clone, and he's also a Steven Anderson clone. It's like he's melded the worst of both worlds together.
Yeah. And I mean, if we're going to take the most charitable position, which I'm not really convinced he deserves, but if I'm going to take the most charitable position, then this is at the very least, the best case would be these are things he was taught by people he trusts and takes as the gospel truth and just repeats it. And why would it possibly be wrong when it was taught to me by someone that I trust? Right. Um, but still, it's just inaccurate and bothers me.
Me too. It bothers me to no end. And you know, like I specifically told him, like Matt, if you're gonna talk thermodynamics, and one of the best parts about the debate on modern day debate that I had with him
Mhm.
was actually in the chat, and Steve McCrae had pointed out, like, you know, get him to do the math. Does he even know the math? You know, he's just screaming it. And of course, I didn't see it because I was just so enraged with Matt Powell. But it's like, yeah,
Right.
they don't know they don't know the math behind. They don't actually know these theories or these laws. They
Right.
just spew what they think is correct.
Hmm. Yeah. And so it's like, oh gosh, like, over a month ago now, I was on Skylar Fiction's channel, and I'm going on Skylar Fiction fairly regularly to just have science episodes. But we talked about the laws of thermodynamics and places where they're just, if you misstate it just a little bit, then you can draw these wild conclusions, and the conclusions themselves seem logical, because you're starting from a false premise. So you get to this, so if you misstate some of the laws, or you misunderstand where you start from, then you can draw, again, what seems like logical conclusions that have no basis in reality, because you started with that bad premise. But if you don't know the premise is bad, like, you're not going to know that anything you ended up with is bad either.
Yeah, yeah, and that seems to be like a new methodology of fundamental Christians, especially young Earth creationists. Is they say, if you start with the Bible, science can fit anything, but you have to start with that Bible, and that's where your bias is, and that's where you're messing up from the very beginning, because you shouldn't go into it with a predisposed bias, I wouldn't think, but I'm not a scientist.
No, if you're a scientist, you really shouldn't go into things with any bias. And to be completely honest, I would have more respect for a young Earth creationist's position if what they said, if their position was, well, I believe the Bible to be true, right? That is what I believe. I believe it's literal, even though, like, I personally think that's like a silly starting place, right? But if I'm going to step into that worldview, and then say, so I know that these scientists, right, are doing this work and their results say X, but X doesn't match up with my belief system. So I don't know why, but like, they're wrong. Like, they can't be right because, despite their best evidence, they can't be right because it goes against my belief system. And honestly, I would respect that position better. I would respect that position. I would respect the position of because magic better, because at least it's an honest one. And trying to twist science to fit, or twist what you say is science to fit into your belief system. That's not really honest. That's a really dishonest approach, and that I don't appreciate.
Well, yeah, and especially when, I would think that most science just obliterates young Earth creationism. I mean, there's science pretty much goes directly against it. Oh, sorry, I got some walk-ins.
No worries, you're good. No, absolutely. If you don't mind me shamelessly plugging for a second.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, please.
The most recent video on my channel, it's really rough because I'm in the process of like setting up a permanent filming space. But it's on how we know how old the solar system is, right? And so I go through what uranium lead dating is, why uranium lead dating is the correct tool to date the solar system, sort of what rocks we specifically date to get the age of the solar system, and why those are the correct things to date. So it's about a 12-minute video on my channel. And it goes into just like, so how do we know that our solar system is in fact 4.5672 billion years old?
Yeah, and it's very complicated math. Like I got into it a little bit because I was recently studying the Fermi paradox for a video.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, like I got into like how do we know how old this universe is, and it's very complex. It's way beyond my pay grade.
There's very little math in this video. That's one of the goals for my channel is again in trying to make things accessible. I'm not going to sit there and derive equations. So if you trust me that I do show like one equation. So if you trust me enough to like accept that it's true, cool. I need to go back. I promised a second video where I actually like derive it, but that's not really necessary for the understanding if you just trust that I'm not being a complete liar.
Yeah, and I would hope that most people would, kind of give you the benefit of the doubt that you might know a little bit about what you're talking about. I mean, for everything that I've seen of you has just been phenomenal. Because I've seen part of your conversation with Skylar, and I've seen the whole conversation with Cyrus. And you just seem like you really know your stuff. So I mean, and that comes, like you say, you've been doing science like your whole adult life, right? So I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. I like it. I like it a whole lot. But I'm one of those weird people that like enjoys math. So
Yeah, yeah, me too. I hate math. At the same time, I try to do it. Like it gives me a headache sometimes. But I think that I'm kind of like you're a normal person when it comes to math. I can do somewhat complicated math equations. My brother
Mhm.
was taking trigonometry in the eighth grade, and like was
Nice.
just this math wizard, and my dad was too, or
Yeah.
is too. But like, I just for me, it was like I can do it, but oh, this is really really hard.
So my mom is a like high school calculus teacher. And when my sister and I were little, right, like she had us convinced for years that like math was fun and it was really just a puzzle. And so when we were little kids, she would give us like basic algebra problems to keep us quiet in church. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I could not stay quiet in church. I thought it was so boring. So yeah, that might have helped me actually be better at math when I got
yeah,
older.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I mean,
But I was too busy
odd
like
fit.
asking the preachers like, "What about the dinosaurs? This doesn't make any sense."
Gotcha. Fair.
Yeah, I talked about that like openly. Like that was like my first atheistic moment. I was like 6 7 years old, and we were learning
Mm-hmm.
about dinosaurs in school, and I went to church, and they were talking young Earth, because I went
Mm-hmm.
to a Baptist church, and and I was like, but what about the dinosaurs? And they couldn't answer me. Like, I think they answered me back then. It was like, oh, they're forgeries, they're frauds, they're fake. Now they just say, oh, they're 3,000 years old, something like that, 5,000 years old, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, humans and dinosaurs lived together and fought in gladiator pits or some kind of nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like I've argued against that. I'm like, well, how did the humans survive in the Garden of Eden with all the dinosaurs there? And they're like, well, because God made the humans the masters of them, and until the sin, they controlled all the
Yeah,
animals and blah blah blah. And I'm like, that is insane, right?
that's yeah, that's bonkers. That's really bonkers.
But let's get into the laws of
Okay.
thermodynamics. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't understand them at
Okay.
all.
No
uh,
problem.
but at the same time, just because I don't understand them doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Right.
It's the same argument when Darth Dawkins came into my room and got me on the laws of logic, and he got me
Mm.
really mad, and I'm like, I don't believe in the laws you're talking about. They don't exist. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if I get mad and I say that, because guess what? I'm still using the laws of logic when I come to that conclusion. So,
Yeah.
you know, um, but like when Matt Powell first hit me with it, I had
Mhm.
no idea at all. So in the second
Right.
conversation, I actually went and studied it a little bit, and I'm like, oh, he is just being absolutely crazy with the things he's saying. And then I learned about,
Mhm.
how he got it from Kent Hovind, and I only knew a little bit about Kent Hovind at that time. But like,
Mhm.
let's hear about it from a real scientist that actually understands it. So maybe my audience can understand why, like, even though I didn't understand what Matt Powell was saying, I was just like totally rejected it, and I was like, what you're saying to me, I just cannot accept this at all.
Yeah. Okay. So the laws of thermodynamics, they're really not that complicated. And some people I think make them out to be this like deep philosophical esoteric thing that they're just not. And where we get them from is just think about it. These are rules that govern engines, right? So if you can relate a system to an engine, so that's like something which does work by heat. So work is moving an object, right? If you can relate a system to an engine, then laws of thermodynamics are going to be your best friend. Um, so, for example, a hurricane acts a lot like a heat engine. But anyway, so in the words of my freshman in college chemistry professor, um, thermodynamics are like women, right? And everybody cringes at this point because they're not quite sure where this is going. But thermodynamics are like women. You can't win, you can't break even, and you can't stop playing the game. So that's kind of conceptually what they are. They actually state, the first law is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So if we're thinking about, hey, I want to generate power, I want to move my car, I want to make an engine work, you can't get something for nothing, right? Um, Energy can't be created or destroyed, so you can't get any energy for free. You can't do any work for free. Um, and that's really all that comes down to. You can take energy and put it into a different form, right? Um, so you can take kinetic energy and turn it into potential energy. Maybe this is something you remember from like high school. Potential energy would be like gravitational potential energy is a great example. This is sort of how hydroelectric dams work, right? You take water from really high up and you let it fall, and then you have potential energy turn into kinetic energy. That's like energy of motion. And then we harness that kinetic energy to spin turbines. So we're taking energy and turning it into a different form. So here's something that's really important about what Matt Powell says about the first law. So he states the first law as matter cannot be created or destroyed. And that's really a very, very different statement. Because we can create and destroy matter left and right. That's not a problem. If matter couldn't be created or destroyed, then we would not have a sun, right? Nuclear power plants wouldn't work. Marie Curie's notes wouldn't still be radioactive and glow green, right? So mass is just another way of storing energy, and we can absolutely take mass and turn it back into a like usable form of energy. That is how a star works. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and it's pretty much what like they use this to try to go against what science says how planets are formed, right? So
Exactly.
because they have to have it in their head that God did it, but when there's actual science behind it, then they have to try to either corrupt it or disprove it. And I think Matt
Mhm.
and Hovind they try to corrupt it. I think.
Well, yeah. So, and this is if you're starting from a bad premise, if you're starting from the bad premise that we can't destroy or make matter, then it's really, really hard to make a solar system,
Hmm.
right? You need a wizard to make that
Yeah,
happen,
you need
right?
magic.
You need magic. Um, and so, but if we start from the correct premise, which is energy can't be created or destroyed, we just switch it from one form to another, then there's no problem.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think another they also try to use it to in a way like human beings are energy and that like God created us and
Yeah.
like and to me it just never really made sense when Matt tried to go there and I'm like for one like is there science that we're actual energy or we just take in energy don't we and we burn it up and replace it.
Well,
I don't know. Like
yeah.
I'm not sure if there's actual science that says, "Hey, we are these beings of energy."
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, matter, right, which you and I are definitely made up of matter. Matter is one way of storing energy, right? Um, it would be really, really difficult to turn you or I into not matter, to turn us into a different form of energy. So if we're going to be really specific with our language, then technically yes, you and I are made up of energy. But the only way to get us, like the atoms that make us up, right, out of that state of being an atom and being matter into a state of being, say, like heat energy, would be for you or I to like turn into a nuclear reactor, which isn't going to happen,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think
So,
that's what he. I think he tried because it really threw me because I don't even think I've really heard other young Earth creationists come at it like about on a human basis, but Matt did.
mhm.
Matt pretty much was like, you know, how are you created? I'm like I was created by my parents. What are you talking about? But
Yeah,
so yeah, like human beings, we're biological creatures.
mhm.
We take in energy and process
Yep.
it, but and that's where you're coming from. Like their premise to begin with is just wrong because he's saying matter can't be
Mhm.
created or destroyed, and it's energy. And
Exactly.
even the layman that does like me, I don't understand the laws. I've always heard that, and I've always somewhat agreed with it. Like I'm not
Mhm.
smart enough to disprove it, so but and they just try to latch it onto us like you are an atheist. You argue for evolution, and I'm like, no, I don't. I don't really understand any of it. I'm just a dude that talks on a microphone.
Yeah. Well, and like even me, I'm not a biologist, right? I deal more in the world of geoscience. And so if we were getting into like the nitty gritty of how evolution works or how like DNA replication works, I mean, I took a class on that once, But
And I would still trust you more than Matt Powell when it comes to it, probably. You know, like,
fair. Well, I'll also tell you when we're outside of my field and what I don't know. And I think that's what's really important, is knowing what you don't know, or when you butt up against a topic that you're not an expert in. And if I'm not an expert in it, I'll tell you. If I'm not qualified to speak on it, I'll tell you.
yeah, and that was like my biggest mistake walking into Matt Powell. And I've said it, like, there just wasn't really a lot to look at Matt Powell back then. Nobody really knew what he was. He didn't have a bunch of stuff out. He just talked about like
Yeah.
video games and just started talking about gay people. But I basically, the first time I reviewed his channel, I was reviewing his high school basketball games because he just didn't have anything out. So when I walked into it, I wasn't prepared for any of his questions. Like I
Right.
tried to research what little bit I could, but when
Hmm.
he's setting me up with laws of thermodynamics and this and that and all, and I'm like,
Hmm.
he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and that's I think where he gets most people is because most people don't understand that. So you got somebody coming in with a snake oil version of the science. You
Yeah.
can hook a lot of people with that.
Yeah, you can. And if you don't, gosh, how do I say this? If you don't have a strong science background to know that what he's saying is incorrect and why it's incorrect and the important distinctions, right? Then it's not going to make sense. And so, very wrong and incoherent as his arguments are, to a layperson, in science, um, it's not that obvious.
Yeah,
I think that's really manipulative.
I mean, a lot of
And I'm not
people
sure if, yeah,
a lot of people don't even know what the laws of thermodynamics are, have never heard of them. So when you get some,
right.
fancy speaking preacher coming up to you, and Matt's, he's not a bad looking guy, so he's got that whole like appeal thing going. Really good speaker. He's coming up to you with a bunch of horseshit, and you're just hearing words that you're not familiar with. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking to authority at that moment. He understands what he's talking about, so I'm going to trust what he's talking about because people are too lazy to actually go and then research what he was talking about.
Well, and yeah, like, he's young and confident, and wears a suit and tie, and that brings itself some credibility that he doesn't deserve. Um,
Oh yeah, I mean, I saw it like in our second
Mhm.
conversation with him, like the way he walks around, like all of his people were just 100% in a Matt, but like even the people that didn't know him, and he would be
Mhm.
rude to, like almost bully them with his personality, and they would
Mhm.
bow to him, because he's
Yeah.
wearing the suit and tie and he's saying I'm a preacher, this and that. And so they would bow to this authority that he doesn't have because he wasn't a
Right.
preacher, and
Right.
all he was doing was wearing a suit. That's pretty much all he was doing, and being
Yeah.
authoritarian. He was being authoritative, and I think that goes a long way
Mhm.
with people that just don't even really care to understand.
And I mean, I think that's like, if there was ever proof that wearing like a suit and carrying a clipboard will get you in anywhere, then it was that. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. He totally, like I
yeah.
was like they're gonna, because he tried to infiltrate the library. He didn't ask them. Like we
Oh
planned it
my
like a
God.
month and a ahead, and he didn't even ask them. He just showed up and he had people staged all through the library. And he's trying to shoot here and shoot there, and I'm like, "Don't you gotta?" And finally, they come up and like, "What are you doing, dude? You can't just film here.
Yeah, you have to
This is
ask.
the state capitol library."
Yeah.
But
Oh
he
my God.
talked his way into it, and we ended up filming there in front of that. I mean, it was a beautiful
Hmm.
setup that they had, and he got his way. And it just like, I'm like sitting there, like, how is this dude getting his way right now? Like, he totally
Mm.
broke all the rules and then made them feel bad about it. I don't get it.
Yeah. Okay, so if you don't mind, let's move on to the second
Oh, yeah,
law,
yeah,
because I
please,
think
please. Yeah, I got a little sidetracked with Cupcake.
you're good. You're good. You're good. Because I think that the second law is actually the one. It's a little harder to understand, but because of that, it's more abused
Well, yeah, and they
by.
claim everybody focuses on that first law, but he claims that we don't believe in the first two laws. So, yeah, what is that
Right.
second law?
So the second law says that. Okay, so the actual science definition is that the entropy in a system always increases. But that is not a particularly useful definition for common conversation. So what that means is that, um, uh, so I said it earlier as you can't break even. So if I'm putting energy into a system, right? Energy into an engine. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. We put gas into our car, right? And that gas, that we're gonna do a chemical reaction, right? Which causes a small explosion, which moves a piston, which makes my car go forward. Okay. Um, However, my car isn't perfectly efficient, right? Not every drop of gas goes to that explosion, right? That moves the piston. Not every amount of energy from that explosion goes into like the movement of the piston, right? And not every bit of energy that's coming out of the engine goes into moving the car forward because there is friction on the road that we have to overcome, right? There's wind resistance. There is, as little as we try to make it with like oil, there's still friction from that piston moving. So all the second law of thermodynamics means is that you can't build a perfect engine. You can't build something that is perfectly efficient and wastes no energy. That's all that means. That's all the second law of thermodynamics is. It's again, it's not esoteric.
Yeah, and it's important because I mean I didn't realize until I actually saw you talking about it with Skylar. I think I didn't realize that they applied to engines because your
Yeah.
young Earth creationists are applying it to life. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
that's all I've dealt with up. And then I'm like, holy shit! And I looked into it, and I'm like, she's exactly right. They're totally using these laws of thermodynamics, which applies to an inanimate object that we use to make our cars move or whatever move, and trying to
Mm-hmm.
apply it to life in general.
Right. And so it doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
Like human DNA replication isn't a thermodynamic system. There are still some things that will be true, right? Energy is conserved, but that's also like while your DNA is replicating, gravity still is pulling you towards the center of the earth. It's still true. It just doesn't really affect, it doesn't matter in that specific
yeah,
instance. Does that make sense?
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I definitely see like it applies. So they're laws, and
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna apply whether you subscribe to them or not. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I try to explain to him. Is Matt, if you want to be an honest character, so if you want to be a
Yeah.
really good Christian preacher going forward, you need to come and be genuine with people, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
he just refuses to do that, and he wants to twist the science to fit his narrative to suck in
And
more people, and he's doing it very dishonestly.
he is, and I don't like that. I don't like. So, I mean, I've said this on Skylar's channel. I am a Christian. Um, I'm just. Uh, I've yet to once have there in my life have there be like an issue where my ability to be a scientist affects, you know,
Well, yeah,
being a,
and another thing that just goes against the things that they say. Oh, you're a scientist, so you must be an atheist. You must hate God. No, you're a Christian,
exactly.
and you still believe in science and
Yeah.
subscribe
I
to it.
I really, and I would never belong to any religion or any particular denomination that required me to not use my brain, right? And so it really bothers me when you see so many of the public figures that are like claiming to represent Christianity are dishonest, are anti-science, anti-intellectualism, are saying that even from their own worldview that like you have a god, you are made in the image of God, you have a god-given brain and you are not allowed to use it, and that makes zero sense to me. And so there doesn't need to be a conflict,
Yeah, I'm
it,
sure there's evolutionary biologists that are probably Christian,
yeah,
and believe in God.
the the majority, if you look worldwide, it's something like 2/3 of scientists practice some type of faith. In the US it's about 50-50, but it's still the majority. So most scientists have some type of faith and are perfectly effectual scientists,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
these are different things.
yeah, and it's the form of is those believers that
Mhm.
I try to latch onto because I don't really care about God belief. My problem isn't with God belief; it's how you use it. You know,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
if you're gonna be a free thinker, highly intelligent, like, way more intelligent than I am, and I've come to my conclusions. Like, you can believe in God and still be intelligent, still believe in the science, know that this world is older than what they're telling you, and
Mhm.
you can compromise with that in your head and move forward and still believe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that hard. It's
Yeah, it's not.
um um yeah, and it, for me, right, again, what I like to talk about is science. But for me, like
Yeah,
my
yeah, we
my
can get off the
faith,
religion thing. Like,
okay.
it was just something that Matt says is, oh, all scientists are
See, and
atheists, and I'm like, no, they're not, dude.
they're not really not. In fact, most aren't.
Yeah,
And
yeah. But
that's,
he's
you know,
wrong about everything.
he is. If
I'm
what you're in,
interested.
yeah,
I'll let
go
you
on.
go ahead, but I'm interested too, in kind of getting into a little bit of weather because I know you're going to school for weather right now, and all of these crazy people seem to think that the government can control our weather. So
You really can't. You really can't control the weather. We can barely predict it. I say barely, right? But like, meteorology is a really young field. It's only about 100 years old. So as far as like fields of science goes, it's in its infancy. Um, and the invention of computers has changed the field by leaps and bounds. Like I said, I study the Arctic, so I study weather of the North Pole. And I only have data, I only have stuff to look at going back to 1979 because that's when satellites were invented, right? So no, so much work goes into the weather. So many really smart people would really love to be able to warn you about if a tornado is going to come to your house, and we've been working on them for 100 years, and the best we can give you is a 20-minute heads up, right?
yeah,
um, so I assure you, we cannot control the weather. Uh, we
I've
really
never understood. Like, I have issues with the government, but like, I just don't think I don't think that there's technology. Like, people literally say, like, hurricanes. Specifically, it's hurricanes. The government are creating them, and I'm like, how
no,
would they do
we
that? Like,
no. Oh, honey, no, 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 no. No, we can't control the weather. I, okay. So even if we were like Star Trek level of technology, we still could not control the weather.
yeah,
It,
yeah. I mean, you're talking
yeah,
about, like, technology that's literally thousands of years in the future, if not millions. Like, there's
exactly.
no way we could ever do that, ever.
No,
And yet
no.
some people believe it. Like, I mean, I've gotten into arguments with people
Oh,
over this shit, and I'm like, you cannot believe like, I don't even know weather at all, and I'm telling you, we can't control it. Like, we might be able to do something to make it a little weaker. I don't know.
no, we can't. Like, and I don't know what people are. There's like a new. Sorry. So, because I'm with like the School of Meteorology at the University of Oklahoma, and it's associated with the National Weather Center, which is the head of the National Weather Service. Blah blah blah. I get a lot of conspiracy emails, because they'll just blast out to like all faculty and grad students or something. And it's like it's not. So one, like the mission of the National Weather Service is to preserve life and property. Like that is, if you're a meteorologist, that is your goal. Your goal is to protect humans and their things, by being able to give like prior warning, for severe weather events, by being able to like, um, you know, oh, yeah, that's like our job is to like keep people safe, and that's what most meteorologists want to do. Um, and no, we're not weaponizing hurricanes because we can't. We're just trying to be able to tell you where they're going to be so you cannot be there.
Yeah,
That's
so
it.
so you can
That's
board up your windows and get the hell
yeah.
out of Dodge. I mean,
Yeah.
some of us are crazy. Down in North Carolina, we grew up with hurricanes, and we would literally drive
Mm-hmm.
out to the coast to watch them come in. And yeah, don't
Yeah.
do that, people. Just don't. Just get away from it. They're insane. But so
It's
so you say you focus on, like, Arctic weather. So are you like, is it like climate change related research, or?
so the Arctic is a really interesting place. So you can't really study the Arctic and not address climate change, because the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. And I specifically look at sea ice and how the Arctic Ocean, the sea ice that's on top of the Arctic Ocean, and then the atmosphere, how those three things interact. So, hey, if we lost a bunch of sea ice here yesterday, am I more likely to have a storm there tomorrow? If I lost a bunch of sea ice, or how does ocean temperature affect the sea ice? How does then hey, if I have a storm come through, is that going to mess with the ocean and the sea? So it's a complex, convoluted thing. But I look at how sea ice changes over the course of like up to a week, and what the atmosphere in the ocean looked like right before that happened.
Yeah, that because climate change and the Arctic in particular are fascinations of mine. Just
Mm-hmm.
because politically it's one of my major political motivations, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's like probably the number one threat to everything here. Like if we don't figure out a way to kind of
Mm-hmm.
help this planet,
Yeah.
I don't see a very good future for our species. So, like, I'm fascinated with it. I want my
Mm-hmm.
daughter and her children to grow up in a world where they can actually step outside and not get burned to a crisp or
Yeah. And
swallowed up
like
by a
where Miami
tornado,
is.
Yeah, because I mean, from what I'm reading, like, tornadoes are probably going to start getting pretty bad here soon. And so, like, about weather. So, why is it seeming to affect our weather so drastically? Like here in Michigan, it's been so super hot, and then we're not getting those blizzards anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
how can people not recognize it? I mean, I just don't get that.
Okay, so there's two questions there. One is like, how can people not recognize climate change? And that's actually the easier one to answer. So let me start with that. And that is a lot of people don't know the difference between weather and climate. Because weather is like, is it going to rain today or tomorrow? Is it hot outside right now? And so the weather is really our current experience of what's going on. And climate is, okay, what are the overall trends in weather over, say, a 30-year period, right? So we as individual people, it's really hard for us to think about, well, today is July 29th. Was July 29th, 30 years ago noticeably different, right? And so that's a lot of people like confuse weather with climate, right? It's cold outside right now, so therefore the planet can't be warming, right? And that I think is just like a misunderstanding of terms, and it being really difficult for humans to think on long time scales. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, yeah, it does. I think.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much what I've always thought too. Is because I mean, you famously had the congressman throwing the snowball. Can't
That
be
was
climate
from my
change.
state. That was Senator Inhofe, and he's from my state, and the National Weather Center is in his state, and it makes me so sad.
Yeah, yeah, I would not want him to represent me at all. I will forever talk about that moment. Um,
You should. Anyway. Um, oh, and then your other question was like the weather, how is climate change going to affect basically the weather, like what you experience? So you there in Michigan, really hot summers, not having blizzards. So the most basic baseline level is um, everywhere on planet Earth has gotten warmer over the last 50 years, basically since we started consistently measuring this stuff. Everywhere has gotten warmer. And so having a warmer summer, having you're still going to have winter, but having a less severe winter, right? That kind of falls in line with global temperatures on average increasing. Um, the other thing you can expect with global temperatures increasing is um,
it happens to us
sorry,
all.
I move too much for this microphone, but it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, so the best way to think about that is that whatever the extremes of your local region, the weather will become more like that. So if you live in a desert region, the weather will become more desert like California. California lives in like a rainy and a dry season. So the rainy season will become rainier and the dry season will become drier. So everything will sort of tend to more extreme versions of itself. Is a really baseline way of saying it.
All right. Yeah, I think I of course I've researched climate
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing that I try to express most to people. Climate and weather are different.
Mm-hmm.
Climate
Awesome.
will affect the weather that you're seeing, but
Yep. Good.
climate is what the discussion should be, not really the weather. Because I've learned that the hard way discussing. Well, it's we don't have people dying in snowdrifts in Michigan anymore. You're not really proving your point. You really
Mm-hmm.
need to understand at least a little bit of the science if you're going to have this discussion on climate change, so you can be, informed and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
maybe change some minds because it's a political issue. We're only going
Yeah.
to change it politically, so that involves getting as many people behind it as we can.
Exactly. So one of the points that I also try to bring up is because people, one of the arguments that's often thrown out is that, well, the climate has always been changing, et cetera, so forth, and that's certainly
Yeah,
true.
that is a Matt Powell argument as well.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Changes in the Earth's orbit or the Earth's tilt, right? There are regular cycles that happen over tens to hundreds of thousands of years, and we very much understand how those things will affect climate. Um, so climate does change naturally. That is a true statement. However, the rate at which the climate is currently changing is unprecedented in Earth's history. Um, and one of the problems that comes with that is that uh, it takes a long time. It takes time for an animal species to adapt to changing weather, right? And so the biggest concern is less that the climate is changing, right? Because that's kind of an inevitable fact of life, but that the climate is changing fast. And the rate at which it's changing is certainly our fault.
Yeah,
There
and
are processes that
that's
can
the
make it.
argument. Is it's not even really anymore. You still do have your climate deniers, but they've under the science has defeated them. So now the argument is, well, it's natural, and we're not responsible for this. And of course we are. I mean, just common sense indicates, we've overpopulated ourselves and we've been burning these fossil fuels for how long now? It's going to have an effect on our
Yep.
climate.
Yep. I really should do a video on my channel on like how greenhouse gases work. I think that would be a good one.
Oh, I think that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't understand that either, because they hear
Yeah.
CO2. They hear CO2. Well, the methane's the biggest problem. And we've got the Arctic is melting. And as far as I understand, there's a shit ton of methane under there. So, you know,
That could be, yeah. Yeah. That can be a problem. And that's part of the reason that the Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the planet. One is the ice albedo effect. So there's lots of feedbacks in the Arctic that make it warm faster than the rest of the planet.
yeah, yeah, it is fascinating. There's just like you don't even really think of it because nobody goes there. It's cold. That's what you think. Like nobody can live there, but it is probably one of the most vital areas of our planet when it comes to ecosystems and how our planet. I mean, how our planet functions. And
It's a really important region. Absolutely.
and people don't understand. Like yes, these things happen naturally.
Hmm.
From the research that I did, I think we've had four major climate things in our history, maybe, or maybe in the history of the world. I can't remember, but like from all the indications, like we are so far ahead of natural climate change that there can
Hmm.
be really no conclusion other than human beings have had a very big impact.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah. Are the earliest computer simulations of, hey, what happens if we chuck a bunch of CO2 into the atmosphere? Turns out planet gets hotter, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. And just a few degrees hotter makes all the
it makes a
difference.
really big
Yeah,
difference.
I
It really
mean, I'm seeing bugs here in Michigan I've never seen before.
does.
They're getting in the house a lot easier. I mean, it's you can't really go outside. I mean, it's so sticky here in Michigan. You can't go outside. It's you stay
Yeah.
inside with the air conditioning running and just pay that bill.
Yeah. Well, and just think about like from an economic cost of oh gosh, in France, like this past week in Europe had a huge heat wave, so it was reaching like 108, 109 degrees all throughout Europe, and most places there don't have air conditioning. So if that's going to become like the new norm, then just think about the energy cost of cooling down France by 20 degrees.
Yeah, and
Right.
we can do it. I think like we have new technology, smart houses, smart buildings, you know, energy efficient. More energy efficient ways than using fossil fuels. Like it would cost a lot of money, and we would have to change pretty much the whole infrastructure. We'd have to knock down every house and rebuild them. But it's something that we're going to have to start thinking about doing
Mhm. Also
very
investing in
soon.
nuclear power,
Yeah,
which I don't know what your opinions on that, but like I said, I worked it with
on nuclear
nuclear stuff.
power.
Yeah.
Well, it is something that I did want to talk to you about because
Yeah.
I'm just not sure. Like from my research, nuclear power is probably one of the cleanest ways that we can get energy. The thing that I'm worried about are nuclear plant meltdowns, things like that. But what I'm really worried about are the nuclear plants on the coasts, because from what I've studied, it takes I think like 30 years to move them, and don't we need to move them before the sea levels rise enough to swallow them? So I don't know, like that's just something I'm not even sure if it's something that I heard somewhere in the distant past and it's not even true. Maybe all of our nuclear plants aren't even on the coast, but I think California has some, at least maybe.
California has some, South Carolina has some, but they're not on the coast. And honestly, I'm just thinking about like, okay, what would happen if a nuclear plant just like got dropped into the middle of the ocean? Like it was shut down, right? And was dropped in the middle, nothing would happen.
Nothing like we wouldn't the oceans wouldn't get contaminated. See,
Oh
this is what I'm
no, no,
interested in learning because I need to find out if the things that I think I know are true, and I the best
no.
way to
Yeah.
do that is ask an expert. So
Yeah. So nuclear power, it's the cleanest, most efficient, definitely most efficient form of energy. Uh, I guess in terms of like safety, it's so safe. It's really so safe. Um, so for example, like the worst nuclear disaster in recent memory is going to be Fukushima, right? Um, exactly 0 people have died or have had negative health effects because of the reactor, right? So worst disaster of recent memory, 0 effect on humans.
yeah, and it seems from what I've seen, like most plants actually
Mm-hmm.
have really good safeguards now. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
it was in the past. I mean, we've had plenty of time to really develop the technology to protect the communities surrounding it. So yeah, this is something
Yeah.
that I'm still learning about because I have as a leftist always been against nuclear energy, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's just because I don't understand it. You know, like you get
Yeah.
fed the horror stories. So that this
Yeah.
is something that I'm really interested in learning more about.
Yeah. Nuclear. So in the United States, if you live within 50 miles of a nuclear plant, the amount of radiation you're exposed to in a year is equivalent to about the amount of radiation you're exposed to if you ate half of a banana.
Yeah, see, and that's something that you don't hear. Like, we
Right.
all like I've literally been in protest at power plants
Really?
way a long time
Well,
ago. You know,
what would you say if I told you that the emissions from coal burning plants or other fossil burning plants, what they're emitting is radioactive and incredibly mutagenic and carcinogenic,
yeah,
and is way more likely to turn you into, let's go with the Hulk, than the half a banana you would get from being next to a nuclear plant.
yeah, that's something that you just don't hear. You know, like you just don't
Exactly.
hear. Like I did watch your Hulk video.
Oh, did you watch my Hulk
Yeah,
video?
I thought it was great. I thought it was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a Marvel
Yeah.
fan. You know,
Oh, good, 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 good.
but yeah,
I'm
I'm
gonna
like
do.
I've always like there's no way any human being is gonna fucking survive that. You
No, that's not how
know.
gamma radiation works. You just that's you dead.
Yeah,
Um,
Lucifer in the chat says I'm right next to a nuclear plant. So
excellent. I mean, like I've hugged a reactor in a 50-year-old submarine, right? Like it's so safe.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I'm fascinated about you with. I saw it on your Skylar conversation. Is yeah,
Mm.
you've been on a submarine, you've been underwater, you've worked with sailors. Um, I'm fascinated with that life. Like, so they go out for what, 6 months at a time sometimes, and
Oh, so it depends. There's two main classes of submarines. One are fast attacks, and the others are boomers. Uh, Boomers are the ballistic missile subs. So boomers go out for 3 months at a time, but they're silent when they're out. A fast attack submarine goes out as part of a carrier strike group, so they'll go out for longer, but they'll like go to port and get off the boat, right? So if you're thinking about like, hey, we're gonna shut the hatch and not see the light of day again, then that's like a 3 month thing.
no. So yeah, but still, that's a long time. You're close quarters, I would imagine.
Yeah. So let me clarify. So I have been out on a submarine and I've been out on a carrier. Both of those for about a week.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you said a week. Yeah.
yeah, my job in the Navy. So what I primarily did was I was at a shore command. I was teaching stuff. So I got to go out and bother people with questions. So I was only out on the submarine for like a week. I have to say, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It's a really close knit kind of thing. There's like not even 200 people aboard. So it is close quarters. There's not a lot of privacy, but I'd go out again in a heartbeat.
I think I would do it.
Yeah.
And Tampa Seahawk, $9.99 super chat, says thank you for your service. And I want to thank you for your service too.
Thanks, dude.
I would hope that the government are getting the smartest people.
In the nuclear program, you really are. That was getting to work with nukes in the Navy, which is what so Nasling nuke is anyone that works with the nuclear power plants. That's what we call them. They're really great people. I got to work for really great people. That are also paying for my grad school. So
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
yeah, I
Lucifer
know.
says I live within walking distance of ORNL plant. So I think
Okay.
I think she's in Tennessee, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Um, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. I've never been around a nuclear plant, at least that I didn't know of.
Oh, except that protest that one time.
Well, I've never lived around a nuclear plant. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we've done
Mm-hmm.
our protests. I've actually been to several protests against nuclear plants, but it was all part of our oil protest. We protested
Mm-hmm.
all the oil companies, fossil fuels,
Gotcha.
and nuclear energy. I think we were mistaken about it. Like the more I learn about nuclear energy, the more I'm realizing I was just wrong. And
Well,
you need to realize when you're wrong. And if, like, from what I understand, nuclear energy could provide energy for the entire world at very, very little cost and very little effect to the planet, as long as we're safe with it.
yep. Yep. Um, and let me just put like every time it there are so what made me so okay what made me feel really comfortable with nuclear power, right, was when I realized that every single US aircraft carrier, which there's 11, I think we have 11 again. There's 11 of those, and every single submarine, I don't even know how many of those are, since the end of World War II. Every single one of those has a nuclear power plant on board, has been running since the 50s with exactly zero nuclear accidents, right? Safe, reliable, consistent power. Um, there have been power plants operating in the US for decades, safe, reliable, consistent. I think the problem is that that word nuclear, a lot of it has a fear response, right? The word radiation sounds scary.
Yeah, and it does. We have all these movies now that give you
Yeah,
these just awful images, and you're like, I don't want to be that guy.
right, exactly. And so, for example, in radiation safety land, right, if you were exposed to, again, the equivalent of eating a banana of radiation, Then you are a radiation worker. We have to monitor how much exposure you're getting, right? All kinds of crazy things go into effect because we're hypersensitive to radiation safety. And that's certainly in response to really bad practices that certainly harmed and did a lot of harm. I'll be generous and say before we fully understood how radiation affects human beings. Um, but uh, but the but again, like when we're talking about like radiation workers and things like that, you can measure how much exposure they're getting to in bananas. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
That is crazy. Like I never even thought that eating a banana I was getting
mhm.
exposed to radiation. Like
Yep.
you don't learn this stuff in school, you know.
No, you don't. Well, and actually, there's a reason that the banana scale for radiation isn't widely advertised, and because like the guy that came up with it realized that this will not make people unafraid of radiation. This will make people afraid of bananas.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
it's
I think that I probably wouldn't eat bananas if I didn't know that, but I love the thing, so I'm it's too late now.
yeah. Well, it turns so potassium, right? Potassium is a thing which we require to live. All anytime you eat potassium, um, some of it is radioactive, and some of it's going to beta minus decay into argon inside your body, and that's part of our normal background radiation. So anyway,
Yeah. Oh wow, man. I feel like I've learned a lot. Like this was a really good conversation. We're gonna have to do this again. I feel like I could sit here and talk to you for hours.
ah, thanks, dude. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
next time I come on, I want to talk about Matt Powell's whole "the sun is burning however many tons a day, and the moon is moving away at this rate, and
Oh, oh,
therefore young Earth."
yes, I
So
would love to have that conversation because that's the other thing that he says that really bothers me. I actually looked into it and it was like, man, you are 100% wrong.
it's very wrong. So let's use that as the teaser, and we'll have another conversation here soon.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I'm gonna look forward to that one and be fully prepared for it. Break out my old notes because man, I tore into him about the moon.
I love the moon.
So do
Anyway,
I. It's my favorite thing to look at. Like I'm always telling people to look at the sky at night. You know, just do it because most people don't. But yeah, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. Can't wait to get in Discord and talk about it. um,
awesome.
but
Well,
yeah,
thank you so much for having me on.
I will. I have your email address now, so I'll email you, and we'll schedule that next conversation because I'm looking forward to that one. I think we could talk a full hour just about the moon and the sun and Matt Powell's rhetoric there.
I could definitely talk about that for an hour.
Yeah. So awesome. Thank you so much. Like I said, guys, her link is in the description below. It's called Science Side Up. If you have not subscribed, you should. Great videos, very informative, and if you're not trying to listen to the smartest people, then you're stupid. That's my thing. Is like I'm gonna surround myself with people way smarter than me. That way, I just get smarter every time I talk to people.
That's my goal.
So, yep. Thank you so much. Thank you, chat, for coming here. Yep, I was about to do that. What the craft. So thank you for linking that Discord. If you want to come and talk in Discord, I'm going to be on Discord pretty much all day. I might take a nap. Starting to get a bit of a headache, and it's because I didn't get enough. I was on Discord all night talking. So. But
Should eat a banana, drink some water.
yeah, yeah, I have a banana, so yeah, I might do that and take a nap, and hopefully it'll be gone. But thank you guys so much. Thank you, Maddie. This was a great conversation. I feel actually like the information that I've just started recently learning about nuclear energy. It was really nice to have somebody back that up because it was kind of going against my political leanings and the people that I deal with. So yeah, I'm gonna have to start arguing with people I deal with now. So. But
Excellent.
we are going to get out of here, guys. I'm going to have a room tonight. I'm setting it up kind of as we've been speaking. So it should be a good room. The topic is, can atheists hate God? So join me for that later tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern. And I will see you guys soon.